Welcome to My Psychedelic Roots, a podcast of conversations with people from a broad swath of lived experience to explore their psychedelic beginnings or roots, what led them to start using psychedelics, what those early experiences were like, and how those roots have impacted their life's unfolding. Psychedelics have become a topic of great interest in recent years, discussed in clinical studies, policy debates, and mainstream media. But beneath the whirlwind of science and headlines are thousands of personal stories, real lived experiences that contain deep meaning and that reflect how we come to understand ourselves, each other, and the world around us. My name is Amy Bartlett, and I will be hosting this series of conversations around psychedelic roots. This will be a slightly longer introduction as we launch the series, and so a bit of background about the roots of this podcast. It is in part born out of my PhD journey, which began at the University of Ottawa in 2020 and is still ongoing, as well as my experiences as a psychedelic user and community organizer. I've been engaging in the psychedelic space since about 2011, and while my own roots are pretty tentative, spiritual, and solitary, things changed a lot for me when I moved back to Canada in 2013, after 10 years working abroad in human rights and social justice organizations. Specifically, my experience has evolved into more community-oriented realms, including helping coordinate the Ottawa Psychedelic Education Network, or OPEN, which is our local psychedelic society here in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Over the years, I've been working with my co-organizers to grow the community, and personally have led well over 100 integration circles, as well as convening public events that hopefully provide opportunities for people to connect with others and with themselves. Through these engagements, I've also had the opportunity to learn and grow, being gifted with deep and transformative insights of my own, and feeling supported by others in the integration of my own psychedelic journeys. This collective orientation bleeds into much of what I do in the academic space. In my PhD project, I've been focusing on the role of community in psychedelic integration and healing. And when it comes to psychedelic integration, so much of the research out there is focused on the clinical approaches to integrating, thinking about one-on-one sessions with a therapist, for example. But for many folks, integration looks very different and is most often done in communion with friends and family, in psychedelic societies, with spiritual communities, or connecting with nature, the universe, or even oneself. I believe all psychedelic use is valid, therapeutic, spiritual, or recreational. And I believe lived experience forms the foundation of what we can know about the field of psychedelics. And so, informed by all of these strands, I wanted to weave them together in a way that helps shine a light on the stories of real people who make the choice to intentionally engage with psychedelics and who are open to sharing their unique insights and lessons from that engagement with others. It is an intimate and vulnerable choice to share your non-ordinary experience with others. And it can also be deeply supportive and deeply meaningful to witness and be witnessed in that vulnerability. My hope is that through these conversations, you might hear echoes of your own unfolding, or maybe find a new way of thinking about your own experiences, whether you take psychedelics or not. I hope this collection of voices helps people to gain insight into the lived reality of psychedelic experiencing, both the shadow and the light, to hear about how people found their way into the psychedelic space, and get curious about the resonance, contrasts, and connections between the podcast guest experience and their own psychedelic roots. So, whoever, wherever, and whenever you are, and whether you're well-traveled in this realm or just beginning to explore, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. In this inaugural episode of the podcast, I was so pleased to sit down with my friend and fellow PhD student, Victor Distefano Wiltenburg. Victor is Brazilian, but has been in Canada for the past year and a half, studying in the Department of Biology at the University of Ottawa. He currently works with medicinal plants and entheogens, studying the ayahuasca neo-shamanic movement in Brazil and Canada. As you will hear, Victor has led a fascinating life to date, and his path has woven together science and spirituality in some really interesting ways, both within and outside of the psychedelic realm. He is also a big reason why this podcast is even happening. He's been so supportive of my thoughts for the series, and so I was honored that he had agreed to sit down together on one snowy afternoon in February of 2025 for a chat together as my first guest. And so, let's hear more about Victor's psychedelic roots. Well, thank you so much, Victor, for taking the time and being willing to talk to me today a little bit about your psychedelic roots. And I wonder, before we launch into what was, I wonder if you wanted to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current engagement and exploration with psychedelics.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Perfect. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to have this chat with you. Um, so I will start say my name, and I would just say Victor, but since there is also some academic background, so my full name will be Victor Distefano Wiltenburg. Um, I'm from Brazil, and I think this will make sense in the conversation. So I was born in Brazil, raised in Brazil. Um, I grew up in a family with spiritism background. So Brazil, it's a very rich country when we're talking about like spiritualism and religious in general. Um, like now that I had the opportunity to travel to other countries, I don't know if there is any country as rich as Brazil about like religion, because we had there's it's so diverse. There's so much like syncretism in Brazil. So anyway, I grew up in this environment, this family, my family. So they are from this religion called spiritism, which basically they believe in spirits. They believe in reincarnation. They will be talking with spirits, talk with the deads, like. And I grew up in this environment. I'm just saying because I think it makes sense in the grand scheme of things because I grew up in this situation. Uh,
Mhm.
so I am from the south part of Brazil. I moved to São Paulo, big city, to do my undergrads many years ago. Not too many years ago, because I'm 32 now, so it's not like I don't know, 15 years ago ish. I did a lot of different stuff. I wasn't sure. Like I entered in this university that was very interdisciplinary. So my university was very different than the rest in Brazil. So I was able to do any course that I want, any background. I'll just take the courses, take the disciplines, and then eventually I'll get some degrees. So yeah, it changed a lot. But in the end, I ended up doing my undergrads in neuroscience. And so first in science and technology and then neuroscience. And then I did a master's in neuroscience. And I've been working and interest on not specific psychedelics, but plants of power and medicinal plants for many years. So during my undergrads, I started doing like kind of like the honors thesis, the honors project in Canada. In Brazil, will be called iniciação like scientific initiation. I started to work in this group with many different medicinal plants. And then one of the plants that my group, my former group used to work was ayahuasca. It's not one plant, but anyways, it was in the context of the group. So this was my first contact with ayahuasca was through the research environment, actually.
Good.
So my first experience was like first time I learned more deeply about ayahuasca was through this more academic point of view. So yeah, like in a nutshell, I have this background in neuroscience. I grew up in a very spiritual environment, which was a big challenge for me because I did a very like restrict scientific university. Like, so,
Mm.
my background is in neuroscience, where basically we learn that our mind, our brain, our central nervous systems, how you want to call, it's very powerful. And a lot of things that we believe can be like external, like spirits, nature, whatever, probably it's just created by your brain. So I
Hmm.
grew up and there's like was this dichotomy.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was a bit challenging being
Mhm.
skeptical and being like a believer, and then like living experience with like spirits, and then I was like, oh no, this is all my mind. But it also makes sense for me to bring this up because I think we will be talking about my experience, and psychedelics became a very spiritual thing for me.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think this is my introduction in 10 minutes.
That's really cool. What I find so interesting, I mean, you've already pointed towards it, but one, coming to your first psychedelic experience through a very scientific lens, and yet with that spiritual background is a really, I think, unique
Mm,
um, field in which to move into your first experience.
yeah, I think like so the ayahuasca was not my first psychedelics experience, but it came in a very sensitive moment of my life, I'll say, I think.
Mm.
Because yeah, as we are saying, so I grew up in this spiritual like environment. And I was very active in this religion, the spiritism. But then university came and then become like a big thing for me. It's like, oh no, to become more skeptical. And then when I was 19, I had the opportunity to live in India for a while. And
Oh,
I did like a more like a religious journey, like spiritual journey in India. When I was there, I was still like in the beginning of the university, so I still believe in stuff, and then it was very spiritual. And then when I went deep into the university, it was like, okay, everything is the brain, whatever. And and then I started to have psychedelic experience, and then ayahuasca came in a very sensitive moment to like bring back all this spirituality that was like
yes.
a little bit a part of my life.
Very interesting.
So yeah,
So maybe before you had your first encounter with ayahuasca, which connects to your research and where you are now, what were some of your early experiences like pre ayahuasca? Because you said you've taken psychedelics before your
yeah,
ayahuasca experiences.
yeah. So I think I was very um like adventurous, like I don't know the word,
Mhm.
like in English at least. Um, I was very excited to learn more stuff. And one good thing about this religious religion that I grow up is that they, they support a lot, they incentivize a lot for you to know more about yourself, like
Mm.
self-development and to know yourself and do like, I don't know, meditation, therapy, whatever. So this is one good thing. I'm very critical of this religion, but it's fine. But there's a good thing is that they incentivize you to try to learn more about yourself. So with that, I was always very excited to try stuff. And I think I'm not sure when was my first experience because it's also I feel that cannabis can be something
Mhm.
very psychedelic actually. I
Mhm.
mean, now with like here in Canada with this very high THC cannabis that people consume, it's definitely can be psychedelic, but also just like being in an altered state of consciousness, even if it's not classically as we understand to be a psychedelic experience. So yeah, I don't remember when like, I started to be more close to cannabis, but then
Mhm.
I think one of the first like true psychedelic experience was with LSD and maybe mushrooms.
Mhm.
And being honest, was my only experience with mushrooms so far in all these years. I don't know much about mushrooms. Like I know the theory behind it, but I never experienced a lot of mushrooms experience.
Mhm.
But that one was very important. It happened, I think, like 15 years ago ish, 14 years ago. I don't know. And it was important to me. It was very connected with nature. Was very important to me to like, oh, this substance, this whatever it is, it's it's interesting, you know. And then I start to have like a very exciting and deep relation with LSD for a few years. But was purely, not purely, but was way more, let's say, mind related than psychedelic related, spiritual related. You know,
Yes.
I was like discovering my mind and even using most of the time using for recreation, like going to parties, but also, uh, like to enhance my experience of the day, you know, like going to a park. And this was like very transformative for me. I introduced a lot of friends to LSD. And then I started to do some experiences. So every Saturday, I was already doing my neuroscience degree. Every Saturday, I would take one
Mm,
different psychedelic by myself in my room, like in
wow.
a safe dose or like, you know, just for me to feel
Hmm.
how it goes. And then I have a few experience, like LSD was a few LSDs in different circumstances, different doses, different sets. So a few days I was feeling like very bad, very down, and I would take to see how I feel. A few times I would feel really good. Um, I don't think this is a good idea, but like this is what I did, right?
Yeah,
And
it's a lot of self-experimentation. It reminds me of how you talked about the spiritism and the encouragement that of self-exploration. You
yeah,
were doing that in that neurology
I think
degree.
I think so. And like
Mm,
I was, yeah, and I don't know. I was I was curious. And this was the first time I tried ayahuasca actually. And then I start to work in the lab, many medicinal plants. I start to work more with ayahuasca. And then I decided to try. So actually the very first time I tried ayahuasca was by myself at home.
wow.
So I don't know if this is good to be talking or not,
It's
but
of course,
because
it's your experience.
yeah, but I do not incentivize people to do the same. I think
Mhm,
it could be super dangerous, and tricky. And so I used the ayahuasca that I was studying. So it was not a very strong one. I didn't have a very powerful experience. So I didn't consider this my first one. But it was my true first one. I mean, it was my true first one, but I do not
mhm.
consider as my first one. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Because like I don't know, I didn't feel much, so it was fine. And yeah, so this was kind of like my first relationship. So I was very excited, but I was going more in that moment of my life. I was moving more towards this psychonautics, you know,
Mhm.
trying to explore my mind and see the potential of my mind.
Yes.
And it was amazing. So like I learned so much about myself, about how my mind would you know, interpretate stuff, like which direction it goes. I will be like having some bad experience a few times and like how to navigate and deal with those
Mhm.
experience. And yeah, I think that was like my first experience. So I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years ago, where you know they say this like ayahuasca will call you,
Mm.
and I believe in that. It's
What were some of the signs? Or what sort of things did you interpret as nudges or signs that this was
Mhm.
something to move towards?
So first, I was already working with it, right? So I was like, okay, I'm working with ayahuasca, and I never try for real. Like I tried once, didn't have much effect. I know the potential because I have many experience with other psychedelics, especially LSD. So like, how is it possible that I never tried for real, especially in a spiritual environment, or not
Mm.
spiritual, but more religious, which is the, the common environment if you're doing ayahuasca in Brazil. This is will be the mainstream will be different types, but always related to spirituality, religion. And then there is this person that this colleague of me, he started to do work on our office too, in my lab. And he was very close to this group of people called Comuninjos that do ayahuasca. And I think it was kind of like the same time, one of my best friends, he also, for some reason, he heard how he started to learn about ayahuasca. Someone else talked to him, told him a lot of information about ayahuasca got to him. And then he was talking to me one day. It's like, oh, actually, I'm receiving a lot. Maybe it's a call for me to do it. And then I was like, oh, okay. But I think like together with that in the same time, like maybe same week-ish, this other friend of me that just joined the lab say, oh, you mentioned once that you want to do ayahuasca. In this environment, people in abroad probably will think about ayahuasca in like South America, like Peruvian ayahuasca, which is more like, the vegetalistas. And
Mhm.
in Brazil, they will associate with Santo Daime, mostly Santo Daime. So it's a very religious practice. Like, it's very strict. It's beautiful, but it is strict. So then this friend of mine, he said, "Oh, no, no, this place, it's very open. You drink, you just have your personal experience with ayahuasca. So it's perfect for first times, you know?" I was like, perfect. And then he came to me, he's like, "Oh, uh, they will do this a ceremony this week or next week. Do you want to join us?" And I say, "Oh, perfect. It was such a good timing." Like I was thinking, my friend was saying, and then like we talk about with my friends, with this other friend, like small signs and stuff. So yeah, and then we went to university together in this environment, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. It was very sensitive. Um,
Yeah, do you mind if I ask a couple questions about it?
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Was it a big group? Was it a small group?
So the way they do in this place, it's small groups. I think at
Mhm,
that time, that night, we were in around 12-ish. It's in the countryside of São Paulo, so you have to travel there. It's around 2 hours from São Paulo,
mhm,
and it was like in a very tiny house in the middle of like a small forest without much light. So we got
mm.
there like during the day, so it was fine. But then at night we realized there was no light in the house, just like candles. It was very like I don't know, not spooky, but like you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Was nice.
atmospheric.
The atmospheric was really nice,
Mm.
and then we went. Actually, it was beautiful because we went for a full moon ceremony. So the whole night it looked like day because the full moon was there, like lighting up everything.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about the experience itself or not.
Yeah, would you be open to sharing a little bit about the experience?
Sure.
Did you feel nervous going into it or mostly excited?
I think mostly excited.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I was excited. I was already working with ayahuasca, so I
Mhm.
like I'm working with my own project, studying this very special and powerful mix of plants. So I was just like excited and
Mhm. Was there a
yeah.
shaman there? Was there someone who was guiding or leading the
Yeah. Then
Mhm.
it would be like there was someone leading, guiding. Um Usually how this is how it's the traditional model. Someone will guide it. In this case, she just like introduced in the beginning. She told us a few things about ayahuasca, how you should behave, like a few kind of like rules. But it's a very open place. It's kind of like it's just you with ayahuasca, and that's it. You know. Usually
Mhm.
they serve 3 times.
So you went up for the first serving.
Yeah, and then yeah, so they do this like introduction.
Mhm.
Then I on my mind I remember like how how I was feeling. I was like very open to the experience. I was like,
Mm.
okay, like I don't know what to expect. I have some intentions, but like I'm very open. Whatever happened, it is supposed to happen. So I think this is a good mentality because I was able to. surrender. I thought that because always
Yeah.
it's never like that. But on my
Right.
mind beginning, I thought that I'll be able to surrender
Mhm.
because I was like accepting anything that happened. So
Mhm.
we had the first serving. Uh, Nothing was happening. So basically,
Mm.
just like it was kind of like now I know after like dozens of ceremonies and I have like a not a high tolerance. I know people has even higher, but I have a decent tolerance, so I need to usually drink a bit more. So the first dose was basically to prepare my body. I enter in this very like meditative state. This will take around like 50 minutes, 1 hour when they open for the second serving. And actually, there's a few interesting things for me in that situation. Like one thing that I remember is that usually ayahuasca doesn't taste good.
Mm.
Uh, it is not that doesn't taste. Um, the taste depends, but like usually it's not terrible, but also doesn't taste good. You know what I mean?
I
And I
like it, but
remember
yeah.
maybe you were lucky. You had like I
Mm.
with like sugar or other things that change the
Mm.
taste a little bit.
Mhm.
Coincidentally or not, last time I went to Brazil to do field work, I had a ceremony in the same place after
Oh.
many years because I want to do a ceremony with a few friends and I say, okay, let's do it. Where I had my first one, I trust the shaman that not the shaman, she doesn't consider herself a shaman, but the let's say the leader, let's
Mhm.
say, I don't know. Yeah.
Mhm.
And let's do it there. And then that the ayahuasca she used was very sweet with sugar because I know it's sugar because I can taste it and then it
Mhm.
tastes like a dessert, which is kind of funny. But anyways, going back to the experience,
Yes.
um, yeah. So the first dose was like neutral, and then but for me it was interesting because the second dose it tastes so good. Like my body kind
Wow.
of like craved that, you know.
Mhm.
I think my
Mhm.
body was just like ready to accept, and it craved the ayahuasca. And it tastes really good. And I had a very beautiful I think the experience was more like personal. We can talk more about in general, the experience, but it was very feminine, which is very common. It's very common to have feminine experience. So I saw this feminine entity approach
Mm.
me, and it was a lot with like her and talking about, and for me, seeing and reflecting about the women's on my life, like my mom, my partner at that time, friends. So it was very nice. Okay, and then I kind of like finished the second serving. I was then feeling so good, feeling so in peace. Was very chill, was very good experience. You know, just a good thing. And then I say to my like when they open to the third serving, Andrea, like this person, the name of the person who guide the place. I was like, oh, Andrea, I'm good. I don't want the third one because usually the third one it's like optional. The first one it's always mandatory, but the second and third one usually not everywhere, but usually they are not mandatory. And then she was like, oh no, you like you have to drink. And I was like, "Oh, really? I don't know. I think she just had an intuition or something because it was not for other people. She say, okay, let's drink less. More for me, she say, oh no, you have to drink. And then in this moment, just to get close to the serving, I was starting to feel like the nausea with the smelling that was already bad for me. So
Wow.
I had the turtles. It tastes so bad. Like I just wanted to puke just to smell it and drink. And I can't puke. For me, it's really difficult for me to puke, like to throw up. And yeah, so I drank the third one and it was a nightmare. It was like, was so bad, the third part, and was so intense. The purging was so strong. I could not throw up. So it was a lot of like going on my like behind, like
Yes.
was bad, was really bad. And then uh was very clear for me that it was just a slap on my face to see like, oh, you think like, you are the awesome one that you drink here and you be like, have just like good experience and was just something for my ego. And it was really good. Like at the end, I just wanted to die. My mind was just like, what I'm doing here? Why did I come here? Like,
Wow.
But end up at the end, when I accept, like, okay, there's nothing I can do. I'll just deal with the comfort, and then that's it. It ended up like being a pleasurable experience at the end. So that was the
Mhm.
first experience, was very powerful. I remember like I had so much to discuss with my friends that went with me there. And it was
Yes.
not a very intense experience. So it was intense, but it was also very mental.
And I wanted to ask a question too about, um, the spiritual experience of that ayahuasca journey, but also we don't need to touch on it. What
Mhm.
feels good to you?
Sure. I think this one, it was spiritual, but not religious. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
it was spiritual in a way that I got in touch with my family and I
Mhm.
was so grateful. I was like, in that moment of my life, again, my skeptical heart was saying, oh, yeah, there's always something else. And yeah, so it was more spiritual in this way.
Mhm.
But one key moment, and I think was one of the things that made me go and had that experience was I, when I was doing the experimental sessions, I came across a Chenga.
Mhm.
My friend, she gave me some Chenga because she was like, oh, I don't want to have it. I don't want to do it. So you can do it. You can have it. So I had Chenga at my place. I was used to do the experience Saturday by myself. But that day, I knew that Shanghai could be super intense. It can be super intense. So I called a friend to help me. So my friend was supposed to go there at night, like around, I don't know, 10 p.m. something. But I had many of my friends had already had experience with Changa, and they told me like the tricks to do like a breakthrough. It's kind of like Wim Hof.
Mhm.
So like it's kind of like you do a Wim Hof breath just to like inhale as much as you can. So I remember that I was so anxious to have the experience, which usually I'm not. I'm so chill. I'm not anxious. Like in ayahuasca, rarely anxious, but I was so anxious that I cannot wait for my friend. So like I did by myself. I had my pipe. I lit it up, and it was very intense. So like the first part of the experience was so intense, like I blacked out. Uh that I have had a few memories, was very traditional Changa experience. And I remember recording myself later saying like, oh, this is too strong for me. I'm not ready. I'm not ready for this experience. I'm not ready for this, let's say, ego dissolution, because it was the first time that I had this idea of like dying, right? Like dying the feeling of my existence. And that that experience was so frightening for me, you know.
Mhm.
Uh
Mhm.
because I had a lot of experience before, but I always like that you exist. And when you lost, at least for me, when
Mhm.
you even that you don't know consciously, you
Mhm.
have this feeling that you exist, you are there, whatever. But then like that one, I lost that. So that feeling was very frightening for me.
Mhm.
But then like, okay, I had the experience, I don't know, took like 15 minutes ish. I saw a lot of things in the universe, blah, blah, whatever. I I went to smoke those time, like that time I was still like a smoker. I went to smoke like a cigarette, like some tobacco, because I was like, I need to process this whole information, was like a lot.
Mhm.
Um, I rolled tobacco, and then was also some like traces of weed in it because it was in the same like grinder. And I entered in this very peaceful meditative state. So I was like, you know what? I still have half of the changa. I'll go back again, like, and went to my room again just to meditate. And then I did it again 2 more times. But this time was like, I just want to be able to understand what is going on. So I smoke less, a little bit less. And then it was I don't know, it was so powerful. We always have key moments in your life. And for me, that was one of the key moments. And I'm sure I'll not be here right now in Canada researching ayahuasca if it was not because of that moment.
And so what did you learn in that moment, or what were you shown in that moment?
So I think it was a lot of things.
Mhm.
Yeah. But the biggest difference that I was conscious or kind like half conscious, let's say. But at least I was kind of like processing the information that I was seeing and feeling. And it was very spiritual. Um, it was spiritual in a way as my spiritism knowledge that I was seeing myself as a spirit. I went to the realm. And the thing is, like, before that, I knew about Changa and DMT, but I have never looked it up for stories. Because if you go on like Airway, Reddit, whatever, internet, and you can check stories, you see a lot of similarities in those stories. I never checked before because I try to be a bit less biased. And it was funny for me because I saw stuff that then like when you check the stories after you say, oh yeah, many people do. Many people see that. And it was like, okay, but I didn't know. So this was like was a self way for me to validate my own experience, and validate that, oh
Yes.
yeah, that things exist. I didn't know that before. So for example, I saw the dome, they always talking about the dome. I saw and I could understand that because I was understanding that in a spiritist way of thinking, like seeing myself as a spirit, a big spirit, like an entity that other entities that I was seeing were passing through me and I was feeling them too, but understanding that they are another conscious, like
Yeah.
that they had their own individuality. So it was very spiritual in this way. I saw a few things that we associate. So like in the spiritists, they believe in the spiritual world. And one of the spiritual worlds that can manifest, it's kind of like the same society as ours, but in a spiritist realm, let's say. So they interact with each other. They have structures, buildings, hospitals.
Mm.
This is like a very spiritist thing, which I believe because I think like our conscious can create like stuff.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, so that one was very spiritual and made me like, okay, so now I want to have the ayahuasca experience too.
So you had this spiritual experience with Changa, with DMT, and you had this very physical experience with ayahuasca. How do those two experiences, how are they connected to what you're doing now
Mm,
and what you're studying, or where your life is, or
mm,
what your priorities are? It doesn't have to be just
hmm.
professional, but yeah.
Yeah, I think they are deeply connected,
Mhm.
for sure. Okay, so what I'm doing now, let's start with that. So what
Mhm.
I'm doing now is, so I came to Canada to do my PhD because after I finished my master's in neuroscience, I wasn't sure if I want to continue academia. Academia is it's messed up. It's not a good environment, whatever. But then I saw as an opportunity to like pursue my interests that became very connected with spirituality. So I'm very curious on how people interact with divinity, with like their gods and their belief in gods and their spiritual experience. So I was looking for opportunities. I still wanted to work with ayahuasca. I had many experience from that first one to me coming to Ottawa, to Canada. I had some experience of ayahuasca every like couple months. Every experience were different in different environment, different settings, different groups. I became very interested in like how those environments influentiate in the experience.
Yeah.
How different it is for you to go to Peru or like in the Brazilian Amazon to drink ayahuasca with some indigenous people and how different it is if you go to Santo Daime to like, even if you're drinking the same drink, which we are not. They are different ayahuascas. But let's say we are drinking the same. Still, everything will change. It's a
Hmm.
matter like the experiences are different. So I was kind of like curious about that. So my supervisor here, he is also an ethnobotanist. So he was curious and interested of like doing this research with me. So then I came here to do my PhD and also in ayahuasca. So this is like where I am right now, studying that. Um, so what is the question? How that thing connects to me right now? I think it connects in a way that that Changa experience, principally, it was so like I grew up in this spiritual context, in this spiritual like believing stuff. And then it's basically like every information, every experience in my life came to be like across the understanding of spirituality that I grow up. So like I
Hmm.
went to the university to do engineering and then neuroscience, and then it was just like everyone else were like bombing me to saying like this is bullshit, this do not exist, or like this exists, but and it's powerful, but it's part of your brain, your mind, like manifesting whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then almost all the psychedelic experience that I had, especially after ayahuasca and Changa, before that was very mental, but after that, it became kind of like a key switch in my brain that even when I do cannabis now, sometimes when it's high in THC or like LSD, it is spiritual for me.
Hmm.
It is mentally sometimes, but even the way I see the mental stuff becomes spiritual. So something changed there
Hmm.
that I don't know if it is like molecule related or like the experience related that switched this thing. That all the psychedelic experience that I have, it's the opposite of all this university and this more materialistic thing. And this is connected with what I am right now. So it's kind of like the psychedelics experience has been showing me about my own spirituality and
Yeah.
reconnecting me with it. Like I'm not a spiritist anymore. I think there are really great things about spiritism, and they know a lot of stuff, you know. But I also think they don't know like just like being exposed to different realities, different spiritual um perspectives or religions, you say, oh, okay, this is also interesting, like it's go beyond that.
What
No?
would you consider your spirituality now?
Um, so mm, there's always ups and downs about believing and not believing, believing more or less. But um, so one of the things that I'm doing in my PhD, it is work with different environments because I want to understand specific this neo-shamanic movement that is happening in Brazil and also spreading globally, right? That is not Santo Daime, not traditional indigenous using, but it's basically white people that went to the jungle and started to do ayahuasca. Like my first experience of ayahuasca was, right? It was
Mhm.
like a person that served ayahuasca. So I want to understand these groups. So I went this last year to do field work in Brazil to interview different people. Um, I think my spirituality was in check. Let's say I was in peace with my spirituality, but I was not like believing in a lot of things externally. I was in peace. I know kind of like yeah, things exist, things that I don't understand exist, uh, but I don't know much about it. So when I went this time to Brazil to interview, I also did a lot of ayahuasca in different environments. And those experiences were really spiritual related to me and more like this external part. You know what I mean? Like not just to internal with my mind, with me trying to deal with my spirituality, my traumas, my whatever was external, was like seeing stuff, was like seeing entities, talking to entities, uh, maybe developing my own mediumship, which is like how they call like in this religion. And so like this last experience brought me in a space that since last year, I think I am like more open and curious to understand and to learn more about the spirit, like my own
Mhm.
spirituality and the spiritual realm and world. And yeah, so where I am right now, I think I have more certainty that a lot of stuff that my parents will tell me all the time are true,
Mm.
about like the spirituality. Um, and I'm trying to, right now, I think I am in the phase that I need more things to, um, I'm forgetting the words here though, but like to, manifestate kind of like my own spirituality,
Mhm.
like not a temple, but like in ritual ceremonies and in order to be connected to that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're creating your own ritual and connections to what you believe in.
Yeah, and also like ways to connect to a few entities
Mhm.
that I've been in touch last time I went to Brazil to this many different
Mm.
environments. So for
Mhm.
example, I grow up in this spiritist reality.
Mhm.
Another spiritist based religion in Brazil that I also connect, it kind of mix with the African roots that we have a lot in Brazil because so many enslaved people there were dragged, but in Brazil, and they manifest their religion the way they could. So we had a lot of African roots religions in Brazil mixed with this white spiritist thing,
Mhm.
and I was in touch with that. So there's a lot of entities from those religions that I I want to understand more right now. So I think I
Mhm.
am in this phase.
That's beautiful. It sounds like you've had so many experiences and, a lot of your life is connected to your psychedelic experiences. I'm curious, what kinds of things do you do to integrate the lessons, the experiences, the trials and tribulations? What kinds of
Mhm.
things do you do to stay connected to your experiences and use them to continue to gain insights or check in
Mhm.
with yourself?
Well, I know it's your field, but I have to say that integration is one of the maybe it is the most important part of a psychedelic
Hmm.
experience. And how I do that is talking a lot
Mm.
with like people that I've like, for example, I encounter these entities, how to differentiate whatever is spiritual, whatever is created by your mind. Usually it's hard to differentiate, but
Mhm.
one thing was talking with people that know way more than me. So for example, like I was in this place where I had this connection with entities from these religions, the Candomblé and Ubanda, and then I was talking with the Baba Orisha about the experience for him to like guide me and see like, okay, this is true. This is like, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe this could be bad.
Mm.
Um, Personally, for me to integrate the experience on my life, like therapy has been a very important asset. So I've been
Mhm.
doing therapy for like, since I think like I started doing psychedelics even before I do therapy. So I used to do the therapy, the CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, was not really connected with this part. But since last year, no, since 2 years ago, I do one kind of psychoanalysis that has been helping me a lot to process all those experience. I said there is a word in Portuguese and from the Spiritism religion that is orai e vigiai, that I don't know how to translate. Is like is it means that you have to be like uh kind of like aware of like your own mental state and spirituality, you know? So it's something that I am worried and I'll be always checking with myself, with friends, with like my environment. if we consider that the spiritual world exists, the influence of spirits exists, let's say exists. So at the same time exists like good spirits. Will be a lot of like tricksters and bad spirits. And they use, for example, this because what the way I see that psychedelics can enhance and wider the connection with these realities. Ayahuasca a lot, but even other psychedelics too. So you are exposing yourself to different spirits, and you can be expose yourself to spirits that they look like they want to help you, but they are like actually tricking you. So I've encountered many people that will think they're like Jesus, you know? And like, okay, maybe you are the reincarnation of Jesus, but most possibly not, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know, do this self checkouts. And it's not just a self checkout, but this came together with like talking, talking with the leaders, talking with the shamans.
Hmm.
So for me, it's very important to be talking with shamans. Usually it's very common at the end of in the neo-shamanic movement for them to share parts of their experience with the others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big advocate of those sharings, but I think it can help a lot because you're sharing, you're getting different inputs,
Hmm.
meditation, to like meditate about my own experience. And this is like do metacognition, right? On your own like cognition to like your own thoughts. And okay, so I had that experience. What does it mean? Oh, I don't know. I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Using your mind in service of your spirit.
yeah, I mean, this is my background, right? Like,
Mm,
my background is like science. It's
yes,
like quantitative. It's like trying to be rational. So, like, I'm trying to see if this works with my own spirituality. And
that's
some,
fascinating.
and sometimes it doesn't work. But but I don't know. I'm trying.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Can I ask you two last questions to wrap up today, Victor? It's been such a pleasure talking to you and hearing about your story. Um, what's one thing you wish you would have known before you started taking psychedelics?
Um, I'm not sure. I think I like my journey. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And all the learning that I had to go through it. So, but
I like
one
that.
thing is because I started it slowly, right?
Hmm.
So I am like adventurous, but also like since I try to be careful. Uh, so I think if I had started with like a very potent, like with very strong ayahuasca since the beginning, which I'm also think it's nice. You can do that, and it's
Hmm.
could be amazing.
Hmm.
But you have to be open that maybe this can change your life, not the way that you want, right? Because maybe
Yes.
you have some realizations that, I don't know, you have to change a few behaviors. And sometimes we don't want to change that. We want to deal with our traumas. We want to deal with like other stuff. But then other things will pop up, will come up and say, like, yeah, this isn't the thing you want, it's important. But this thing here, maybe it is more important.
Hmm. I think that's good advice and good insight. And last
Mm.
question, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned from your psychedelic experiences so far?
Oh, then. Um, hmm. The most important one, I don't know. Like, I think, okay, actually, for me,
Mhm.
it's we know nothing.
Mm,
Like, there's so much like to know, to learn, and I know that I know way more than when I started. Right, this spiritual journey, this psychedelic journey, the beginning of the 20s, but I know more, but I know nothing. Yeah.
I think that's very wise. Victor, thank you so much
Yeah, it was my
for
pleasure.
sharing. Yeah, it was really a pleasure to get to know you and get to know your experiences with these substances and how your experiences are continuing to be experienced, pulling through all these threads throughout your life. It's really beautiful. And I love the interplay of the material, the neurological, and the spiritual. The andness of that experience is so apparent in how you live your life and the kind of choices you make and the things that you care about in your professional and your personal life. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Bye.